She thought she was travelling to Sicily to bring her little brother home. But the boy she had searched for all her life now belonged to another family, and the man who had raised him was the last person she ever expected to love. As long-buried secrets begin to surface, Alessia must face a devastating choice between the family she lost, the love she found, and a betrayal that began with her own father. You are listening to a story exclusively narrated on the Dark Romance Stories channel. Relax and step into the world of love stories filled with mystery, emotions, and passion. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to support us. This content is the property of Dark Romance Stories. Please do not copy or re-upload it in any form. The Boeing dipped below the clouds, and Sicily rose out of the sea like something wounded and beautiful. And Alessia Moretti pressed her forehead to the cold plastic window and let the island break her heart before she had even touched its ground. She had rehearsed this arrival for 15 years, in the foster homes of New Jersey, in the cramped apartment in Queens where she had lived alone at 19, working 2 jobs, keeping a photograph of a small boy taped inside her closet door so that no landlord, no boyfriend, no well-meaning stranger would ever ask about him. The boy in the photograph was 4 years old. He had a gap between his front teeth and a plastic dinosaur clutched in one fist, and he was laughing at whoever held the camera. That whoever had been her. She had been 11. His name was Matteo. He had been her brother. And then, one grey morning, he had not been anything at all, because their father had come home, smelling of cigars and other men's cologne, had picked the boy up out of his crib and had walked him out to a black car idling at the curb. Alessia had watched from the top of the stairs. She had been told to stay there. She had stayed there her whole life, in a sense, frozen on that top step, watching the black car pull away, watching the small hand press against the rear window and then slide down out of sight. Cugino Enzo had explained it to her years later, drunk at a wedding, before their father had him killed for a different reason entirely. "It was a trade, cara. Your papa was nothing in this country. The Fontanas in Sicily, they had a problem. A man with no son and a wife who wanted one. Your papa had a son and no power. So..." Enzo had spread his hands, the universal gesture of "what can you do?" Everybody got what they wanted. Everybody except a 4-year-old boy and the sister who had loved him. The plane touched down at Palermo Falcone Borsellino, named for 2 judges the Mafia had blown to pieces on the highway, and Alessia thought that was fitting, that she should land in a place named after murder to go looking for the crime that had made her. She did not come as a tourist. She came as her father's daughter, which meant she came with money that was not clean and a name that opened certain doors and closed others. And she came with a plan that was mostly rage, wearing the costume of a plan. The driver holding the card with her name was young, olive-skinned, careful-eyed. He did not offer to take her single bag. In Palermo, you learned quickly not to touch what was not yours. "Signorina Moretti," he said, "the car is this way." "Whose car?" He almost smiled. "You asked to meet Don Fontana. Don Fontana does not send a taxi." So it was true then. She had put out feelers for 3 weeks, through her father's old contacts in Brooklyn, through a lawyer in Naples who owed a debt to nobody living, through a nightclub owner who moved between worlds. And the name that had come back again and again, threaded through the underworld of western Sicily like a bloodline, was Fontana. Draco Fontana. And attached to that name, spoken more quietly, had been another. A young man, 20 or so, raised as Fontana's heir. Not born to him. Taken in, the whispers said, from America, a long time ago. Matteo. Her hands did not shake as she got into the car. She had trained them not to. But somewhere beneath her sternum, something she had kept locked for 15 years pressed against its cage and howled. The car climbed out of the city and into the hills, past groves of olive trees silvered by the afternoon, past the ruins of villas the Romans had built and abandoned, past a landscape that did not care what any human being had lost. The road narrowed. Gates appeared, wrought iron, 12 feet high, crowned with something that pretended to be decoration and was in fact a warning. The car slowed. Cameras turned to watch it, blank glass eyes, and Alessia felt herself watched in return, weighed, measured. The house, when it came, was not a house. It was a proposition. A long, low sprawl of honey-coloured stone and black glass laid across the crown of a hill, with terraces stepping down toward the distant sea and cypresses standing like sentinels along the drive. Old money and new violence married. She understood, looking at it, exactly what she was walking into. "He is waiting on the terrace," the driver said, and left her. She walked through the house alone. That was deliberate, she understood. A test, a display. See how small you are. See how easily you could be lost in here. Marble underfoot, paintings that belonged in museums, a silence so total it had texture. And then a wall of glass slid open on its own, sensing her, and the warm evening air came in, smelling of salt and rosemary, and she stepped out onto the terrace and saw him. Draco Fontana stood at the balustrade with his back to her, watching the sun bleed into the Tyrrhenian Sea. He was tall, built like something that had been made rather than born, and he wore a charcoal suit with no tie, the collar open, the sleeves pushed back to reveal forearms marked with old ink she couldn't read from here. He did not turn around when she came out. He let her stand there in the gold light, and he let the silence do its work. "You've come a long way, Signorina Moretti," he said at last. His English was accented, low, unhurried, the voice of a man who had never once in his life needed to raise it. From America, alone, without asking anyone in Palermo for protection. A pause. "That is either very brave or very stupid. I have not decided which." "Maybe both," she said. Now he turned. She had prepared herself for cruelty, for coldness. She had not prepared herself for the face, which was not a gangster's face at all, but something colder and finer, hard bones and a hard mouth, and eyes the grey of a knife left out in the rain. He looked at her the way a man looks at a locked door he has decided to open, and for one endless second neither of them moved, and Alessia felt the ground of her whole careful plan tilt beneath her feet, because whatever she had come here expecting, it had not been this. The sudden, treacherous pull of it, the recognition that felt like danger. "So," Draco Fontana said softly, "tell me why you're really here." She told him the lie first, because the truth was a knife, and you did not hand a man like this a knife on the first evening.
Business, Alessia said. My father's business. He's dead now. That part was not a lie. Salvatore Moretti was very much alive, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, but she needed Draco Fontana to believe there was no one behind her, no one to avenge her, no leverage against her but herself. He left interests in Sicily that were never settled, roots, debts. I came to close the books. Draco gestured to a low table set with wine and cold things to eat, and they sat, and a servant filled 2 glasses with something the colour of dark rubies, and vanished. "Your father," Draco said, "did business with my family?" "A long time ago, before I was old enough to understand it." She let her eyes drift out to the sea. "There was a deal. 40 years, my father used to say, that deal held. And then it didn't. He wanted me to make it right before there was blood." It was well constructed, her lie, vague enough to be true, specific enough to be believed, and she watched him take it, turn it over, and set it down without deciding whether to trust it. "You don't look like a woman who closes books," he said. "What do I look like?" He considered her over the rim of his glass. The last light was going out of the sky, and the terrace lamps had come on, low and warm, and they caught the grey of his eyes and made them almost human. "You look like a woman who is looking for something," he said, "and who has convinced herself she'll be all right if she doesn't find it. But she won't be. I can see that, too." Alessia's pulse jumped. She had a sudden, vertiginous sense of being read down to the bone, and she hated it. And beneath the hating was something worse, relief. That someone, anyone, had finally looked. "You're very confident," she said, "for a man who met me 20 minutes ago." "I'm confident," Draco said, "for a man who has spent his whole life deciding in the first 20 seconds whether the person in front of him is a friend, an enemy, or a lie. It's kept me alive." He set the glass down. "You are not a friend, Signorina Moretti. You came here wanting something from me, and you haven't told me what it is. That, in my world, is the definition of an enemy." The air on the terrace changed. Somewhere below, in the dark of the garden, she became aware of men who had not been visible before. The flare of a cigarette, a shape against a cypress. She had walked into the mouth of something, and it was closing, gently, unhurried, entirely certain of itself. "And yet," Draco went on, and his voice dropped, softened, became almost intimate, "I let you into my house. I sent my own car. Do you want to know why?" "Why?" "Because 3 weeks ago, a woman in New York started asking questions about my son." The world stopped. Alessia held herself very still. She had trained for this too, for the moment the lie failed, but no training survives the actual thing. She felt the blood leave her face and knew he saw it. "So," Draco said, and now there was no softness in him at all, only the knife edge. "Let us stop pretending we are talking about roots and debts. You came a very long way to look at my son. I want to know why." "And I promise you, Alessia," the first time he had used her name, and it landed like a hand around her throat, "you will tell me the truth, one way or another. The only choice you have is which way." She thought of Matteo's small hand sliding down the rear window of a black car. She thought of 15 years. She thought that she had crossed an ocean, and she was not going to be frightened out of it now. Not by a beautiful man with dead eyes. Not by anyone. "Where is he?" she said. Her voice did not shake. "I want to see him." That is not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. For a long moment, Draco Fontana looked at her, and something moved behind his eyes. Surprise, she thought, and under it, a flicker of something that had no business being there, something almost like hunger. Men had threatened her before. Men had leaned across tables and let her see the gun. None of them had ever looked at her like this, as though her refusal to break was the most interesting thing that had happened to him in years. "You're not afraid of me," he said, and it was not a question, and it was not entirely pleased. "I've been afraid my whole life," Alessia said. "I used it all up before I got here." He stood. He came around the table, unhurried, and she made herself stay seated, made herself tilt her chin up and hold his gaze as he stopped close enough that she could smell him. Cedar, smoke, something darker underneath. He reached down. She thought, absurdly, that he might touch her face. Instead, he picked up her wine-glass, the one she hadn't touched, and turned it in the lamplight. "You'll stay here tonight," he said, "in this house, my guest." A pause that was all threat. "You'll understand that no one leaves my house without my permission. Not my enemies, not my guests." He set the glass down. "And in the morning, Alessia Moretti, you're going to tell me the truth about my son. Because I've decided something in the last 20 minutes, and I'm never wrong when I decide fast." "And what have you decided?" He leaned down, close to her ear, and his voice was almost tender, which was the most frightening thing of all. "That I'm not going to let you leave," he said. "Sleep well." She did not sleep. The room they gave her was larger than any apartment she had ever rented, with a bed like a raft and windows that ran floor to ceiling and looked out over the black garden to the blacker sea. She tried the door once, quietly, and found it unlocked, which was worse than a lock, because it meant they were not afraid of her leaving. She stood at the glass a long time, watching the moon lay a road across the water, and she thought, "He is under this roof. After 15 years, my brother is sleeping under the same roof as me, and he doesn't know my name." At some point after 3, she gave up on sleep and went to the window seat and folded herself into it. And that was when she saw the boy. He was down on the lower terrace, alone, sitting on the edge of the empty pool with his feet in the water and a cigarette burning down forgotten between his fingers. Even from 4 floors up, even in the dark, she knew him. It was not the face. The face had become a young man's face, sharp and handsome, all the softness burned out of it by the life they had raised him into. It was the way he sat, hunched a little, shoulders drawn up, exactly the way he had sat at 4 years old on the top step of their stairs when their parents were fighting, making himself small, making himself a target no one would bother to hit. Alessia's hand pressed flat against the cold glass. Matteo. She did not remember deciding to move. She was simply in the corridor, barefoot, then on the stairs, then out through a door onto the terrace, and the night air hit her and she stopped, because up close the resemblance was unbearable, and because he had heard her and turned, and for 1 second She was looking into her mother's eyes, set in her brother's face. "You're the American," he said. His English was good, lightly accented, a little insolent. "The one who's got everyone whispering." He took a drag of the forgotten cigarette, made a face at its taste, flicked it into the empty pool. "My father put 3 extra men on the walls tonight. Because of you. Who are you?" My father. He meant Draco. Of course he did. "My name is Alessia," she managed. "That's not an answer to what you are." She almost laughed. He had said it exactly as Draco had said it, the same rhythm, and she understood with a lurch that this boy had been shaped by the man in that house as surely as clay is shaped by hands, that whatever her brother might have become in another life had been overwritten, and the boy in front of her was a Fontana in everything but blood. "What's your name?" she asked, though she knew. "Matteo." He said it easily, a name that had been his so long it had grown into him. "Matteo Fontana." And then, watching her face with a sudden sharpness that was pure Draco, "Why does that do something to you?" "Nothing," she said. "It's a good name." She had promised herself on the plane that she would not do this, would not blurt it, would not fall on him weeping, "I'm your sister, they stole you, our father sold you like a case of wine," because he was not a lost boy anymore. He was a young man, armed with a name and a family and a certainty about who he was, and to tear that away in the dark by an empty pool would not be love, it would be cruelty. She had come to find him, yes, but she was beginning to understand, standing there, that finding him and taking him back were 2 entirely different things, and that the second might destroy him. "You should go inside," Matteo said. "He doesn't like people wandering." A pause, and then younger suddenly, almost shy. "He's not as bad as they say, my father. People come here scared of him, but he raised me like—" He stopped, shrugged. "He's the only family I've got. My mother died when I was small. Before that, I don't remember anything. Sometimes I think I remember a—" He frowned, chasing something. "A yellow room, and someone singing. But my father says that's just a dream, that I was born here." Alessia stopped breathing. The yellow room. Their bedroom in the apartment in Elizabeth had been yellow. Their mother had painted it herself, before she got sick, before everything. A bright, hopeful yellow, and she used to sing to them at night, an old Neapolitan lullaby about a fisherman and the moon. O Sole Mio, wasn't it? No, something older, something Alessia could still hum, but could no longer remember the words to. "What was the song?" she whispered. Matteo looked at her strangely. "What?" "The song, in the yellow room. Do you remember how it went?" And he opened his mouth, and for one impossible second she thought he would sing their mother's lullaby back to her across 15 years and an ocean and a lie. "That's enough." Draco's voice came out of the dark like a blade. He stood in the doorway, and how long he had been there she couldn't know. And Matteo stood at once, guilty, a boy caught, all his insolence gone. "I was just talking to her. Go to bed, Matteo." The boy went. He passed his adopted father, and Draco's hand came up and cupped the back of his head for a moment, rough and fond, a gesture of such genuine tenderness that it stopped Alessia's heart, because it was real, because whatever this man had built his fortune on, the love in that hand was not counterfeit. Then Matteo was gone, and she was alone with Draco Fontana in the dark, and he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't name. "You were crying,"
he said. No. You were. He crossed the terrace. You looked at my son and you cried. He stopped in front of her, and his voice was very quiet now, very controlled, and underneath the control was a fury so cold it burned. Who is he to you, Alessia?
Who is that boy to you?
She almost told him then. The truth crowded her throat, hot and unbearable, and it would have been so easy to let it out into the dark. He's my brother. He's mine. They took him. But some old instinct, the instinct of a girl who had survived a house full of dangerous men, by knowing when to speak and when to swallow, held her tongue. He reminded me of someone, she said. That's all. Someone I lost. Draco studied her. The moon had gone behind cloud, and she could barely see his face, only the pale shape of it and the grey glint where his eyes were. That is a very small truth, he said, wrapped around a very large lie. I can feel the shape of it. I just can't see it yet. He was so close, she could feel the warmth coming off him. You should understand something about me.
That boy is the one thing in my life I did not build with money or blood. Everything else I own, I took. Him I was given. A pause. By a man I never met. Through people I paid to forget. And I have spent 15 years being grateful for the one clean thing in a dirty life. Do you understand what I'm telling you? No. I'm telling you that if you have come here to take him from me, his voice never rose, never cracked, and that was what made it terrible. I will bury you in this garden and plant something beautiful on top of you, and I will feel nothing at all. Are we clear? Alessia should have been afraid. She was afraid. But underneath the fear, a strange calm was spreading, because she had heard, in his threat, the thing he had not meant to reveal. He loved the boy, really loved him. And a man who loved could be reached, could be wounded, could be moved, and could be dangerous in ways a man who felt nothing never was. You keep threatening to kill me, she said, but you keep not doing it. You sent your car, you gave me a room, you came out here in the middle of the night when you heard I was talking to him. She tilted her head. For a man who buries his problems in the garden, you're being very careful with me. Why? The silence stretched. Below them, the sea moved against the rocks, patient, ancient, keeping its counsel. I don't know, Draco said finally, and it was the most honest thing he had said all night, and it seemed to cost him something. That is not a sentence I say often. I don't know why I haven't had you driven to the airport with a warning and a bruise. You are a problem I should have already solved. He looked at her, and the anger had drained out of his voice and left something rawer. You walked onto my terrace tonight, and you looked at me like you were the dangerous one. Do you know how long it's been since anyone looked at me like that? Like I was a man and not a don? The confession hung between them, and it changed the air, and they both felt it change. Tomorrow, Draco said, stepping back, reasserting the distance like a man pulling a coat closed against cold. Tomorrow you tell me the rest. Tonight? He stopped at the door. Tonight, stay away from my son. Morning came thin and gold over the hills, and with it came a summons. Coffee on the terrace, the same table, the sea now bright and blameless. Draco was already there, in a black shirt, reading something on a phone that he set face down when she appeared. A servant poured coffee and left figs and bread and honey. You slept, he observed. You watched the cameras. The corner of his mouth moved, not a smile, but the country a smile came from. You learn quickly. She sat. She had made a decision in the long hours before dawn, and it frightened her more than his threats had. She was going to stay. Not run, not confess. Stay and learn him, and learn Matteo, and find the truth of what had really happened 15 years ago. Because Enzo's drunken story was one version, and she was beginning to suspect there were others, and she needed to know which was real before she blew up 3 lives with it. "I'll tell you something true," Alessia said, "if you tell me something true back." Draco leaned back. "A negotiation, finally, something I understand. Go on." "My father did sell something to your family, 15 years ago, in New York." She watched his face and saw nothing move. "You said Matteo was given to you by a man you never met, through people you paid to forget. I want to know who that man was." Now something moved. A stillness came over him, the particular stillness of a predator that has heard a sound in the grass. "Why?" "Because I think it was my father," she said. "And I think that means you and I are connected by something a lot older than last night." Draco was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and came around the table and did something she did not expect. He crouched beside her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers, close, unbearably close, and he took her hand in both of his. His hands were warm, scarred across the knuckles, gentle. "Listen to me," he said, very low. "I don't know your father's name. I made sure of that 15 years ago, because a name is a thread, and a thread can be pulled, and I wanted no one able to pull a thread that led back to how I got my son. But you are telling me you have that thread." His thumb moved once across the back of her hand, and she felt it in her spine. "Do you understand that you have just made yourself the most dangerous person in Sicily to me? And also," his voice dropped further, almost to nothing, "the only person I've wanted to keep in a very long time." Those 2 things should not live in the same woman. And yet here you are. He took her to Palermo 3 nights later, and he took her to the club because, he said, he wanted to see who she became when she thought people were watching. The club was called Serpe, the serpent, and it belonged to the Fontanas the way the hills belong to them. Quietly, absolutely. It occupied the shell of a bombed-out palazzo in the old city, and from the street it was nothing, a black door and a man the size of a door beside it. But inside it opened into 3 floors of gold light and dark glass and beautiful people arranged like offerings. Music moved through the floor and up through the soles of her feet. Champagne moved through the crowd on silver trays. And everywhere, folded into the beauty, was the other thing. The men in good suits who watched the doors, the women who watched the men, the particular electricity of a room where everyone knows that any night could be the night the wrong car pulls up outside. Draco moved through it like weather. People turned toward him and away from him at once, drawn and afraid, and he acknowledged almost no one, and his hand rested at the small of Alessia's back the entire time, light, proprietary, mine. And she let it, and she hated how much she let it. They had given her a dress. It had appeared in her room that afternoon, black, backless, worth more than she used to make in a season,
and she had understood it as another kind of test and worn it anyway, because she had decided to fight this war on her own terms, and the dress was armour as much as anything.
"They're all looking at you," she said, close to his ear over the music. "They're looking at you," Draco said, "wondering who you are, wondering what you are to me." His hand pressed a fraction firmer against her spine, wondering whether they're allowed to want you. And are they? He turned his head, and his mouth was very close to hers, and the grey eyes had gone dark in the club light. "No," he said simply, "they are not." It should have angered her, the possessiveness, the sheer arrogance of it. Instead, it moved through her like the music, low and warm and dangerous, and she thought, this is how it happens. This is how good women drown. They mistake the undertow for being held. Matteo was there too. He should not have been. He was 20, wild, and Draco kept him on a tight rein. But he had come with a girl on his arm, and a swagger he had not earned, and Alessia watched Draco watch him from across the room, and she saw the whole complicated love of it, the pride, the fear, the exhaustion of a man raising a boy in a world that ate boys. When a man Alessia didn't recognize approached Matteo's table, older, hard-faced, leaning in too close, saying something that made Matteo's face go tight, Draco was moving before Alessia had even registered the threat. She followed. "Just a conversation, Don Fontana," the hard-faced man was saying, palms up, backing off already, "between friends." "My son is not your friend," Draco said. He did not touch the man. He did not need to. Two of his own had materialized on either side. "You'll leave now, and you'll tell Nunzio Sciarla that if he sends someone to speak to my son again instead of speaking to me, I will take it as an answer to a question I haven't asked yet. Do you understand the question, or should I make it clearer?" The man understood. The man left. And Matteo, humiliated, 17 kinds of angry the way only a young man protected against his will can be, shoved back from the table. "I can handle myself, you can't," Draco said, quiet, final, and there was so much love buried in the hardness of it that Alessia's throat closed. "That's the whole point of me, Matteo, so that you never have to." The boy stormed off toward the bar. The girl trailed after him, and Draco stood there a moment, in the middle of his own kingdom, looking suddenly tired, suddenly mortal. And Alessia, before she could think better of it, put her hand on his arm. "He knows you love him," she said. "The storming off. That's a boy who's safe enough to be angry. You gave him that." Draco looked down at her hand on his arm, then at her face, and something in him she had not seen before came unlatched, just for a second, just for her. "Who are you?" he said, but it was not a threat this time. It was almost a plea. "You come into my life, carrying a secret that could burn it down, and then you say a thing like that to me. A thing I needed to hear, a thing my own men would never dare say, and I forget for a whole minute that I should be afraid of you." He lifted his hand and, with one finger, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and the touch went through her like current. "This is a very effective way to destroy me, if that's what you came to do." "It's not what I came to do." "Then what did you come to do?" The music surged, the lights turned, and Alessia, looking up at the dangerous, beautiful, grieving man who had raised her stolen brother into someone worth loving, felt the ground of her whole mission crack beneath her.
because the plan had never included this, had never accounted for the possibility that her enemy would have gentle hands and a wound where his heart should be, and that she would want, God help her, to press her palm against it. "I don't know any more," she said, and it was the truest thing she'd said since she landed.
The truth, when it began to come apart, came apart in a ledger. Draco kept his real business, the business under the business, in a study behind a bookcase that swung open when he pressed his palm to a certain spine. And the third night after the club, unable to sleep, half out of her mind with the closeness of Matteo and the closeness of Draco and the impossibility of both, Alessia went looking for it. She was not proud of it. She told herself it was for Matteo. Mostly it was. The study was small, windowless, cold with the particular chill of a room where terrible arithmetic gets done. Ledgers lined one wall, decades of them, the Fontana Empire written out in the patient hand of men now dead. She did not have long. She went to the oldest, the ones from the year Matteo would have come, and she ran her finger down columns of numbers and names in a code she half understood from a childhood spent absorbing the grammar of this world. And she found it. Not Matteo's name, there was no Matteo, but there was an entry. In the winter of the year she was 11, a payment received from NYSM against goods delivered per agreement, Brooklyn. And beside it, in a different hand, a later annotation. The boy. S.M. Salvatore Moretti. Her father. She stood there in the cold room, with 15 years collapsing into a single line of ink, and the thing she had crossed an ocean to confirm was confirmed. And it was not relief she felt. It was a sick, spreading horror, because seeing it written down made it real in a way even Enzo's drunk confession hadn't. Her father had not lost Matteo, had not had him taken, had not been robbed. He had sold him, had written a price, had somewhere received a payment against goods delivered. "You shouldn't be in here." She turned. Draco stood in the open bookcase, and he was not angry, which was worse than angry. He was watching her with a terrible attentiveness, and his eyes went from her face to the open ledger to her finger still resting on the line, and she saw him read it upside down, saw him find S.M., saw the exact instant the pieces came together in a mind built for finding patterns in blood. S.M., he said slowly. Salvatore Moretti. He came into the room. "Your father. You told me he was dead." "He isn't." "No." Draco stopped across the small table from her, the ledger between them like a body. "I don't imagine he is. Men like your father are very hard to kill. I would know. I've buried a lot of things that were supposed to be hard to kill." His voice was so even. That was the frightening part. "So, the boy. Matteo, the boy." He touched the annotation. "You knew this before you came. That's why you came. You knew Matteo was... what? Tell me what he is to you, Alessia. No more small truths. I am done being lied to in my own house." And she was done lying. She was so tired suddenly, so unbearably tired of carrying it alone. "He's my brother," she said. The room went utterly still. "He's my little brother," she said, and once it started, it wouldn't stop. 15 years of it pouring out. "His name was Matteo Moretti." He was 4 years old. There was a yellow room. Our mother painted it. She sang to us an old lullaby. And one morning our father came home and picked Matteo up out of his crib and carried him down to a black car. And I watched from the top of the stairs, and I never saw him again. 15 years. I kept his picture inside my closet door. I taught myself Italian. I saved money. I traced the deal through every drunk cousin and dirty lawyer I could find, until the name that kept coming back was Fontana. And I came here to find him. Her voice broke. And I found him. And he calls you Papa. And he doesn't remember me. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. Draco Fontana stood very still and looked at her, and she watched 15 years of his own life rearrange themselves behind his eyes, the clean thing, the given thing, the one gift in a dirty life, revealed now as the same crime as all the rest, stolen, bought. A 4-year-old boy carried down to a black car by a father who wrote his price in a ledger. He was stolen, Draco said, testing the shape of it. I raised the stolen child. I told him his mother died. I told him he was born here. I built his whole life out of a lie a man in Brooklyn sold me. He put both hands flat on the table and leaned on them, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked not dangerous, but destroyed. I loved him because he was mine, and he was never mine. He was yours. He was ours, Alessia whispered. He was our mother's. She died 4 years after they took him. She died thinking he was somewhere in the world, not knowing her name. Draco was silent a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, had gone quiet and cold, and absolutely certain. The voice of a man who has just found the true target of a rage he's carried for years without knowing where to point it. "Your father is alive," he said. "Yes." "In New York." "Yes." Draco straightened, and when he looked at her now, there was the old hunger in his eyes, but it had fused with something new, something that made the hair rise on her arms. "Then we are going to New York," Draco Fontana said. "You and I. And your father is going to explain to me, in person, exactly what he sold. And then I am going to decide what it costs him." They did not go to New York. Not yet. Because that night everything came apart faster than either of them planned, and it came apart in Sicily first. Draco did not sleep after the study. Alessia knew, because she didn't either, and twice in the dark hours she heard him moving through the house, heard the low murmur of the phone, heard a car come and go on the gravel below. Whatever machinery a man like him possessed, he had set it turning. By dawn the house had the taut, humming quality of a place preparing for something. More men on the walls, the staff quieter, Matteo confined to his rooms with a guard on the door and no explanation, which made him furious. "Why am I a prisoner in my own house?" he demanded at breakfast, appearing, despite the guard, throwing himself into a chair. He glared at Alessia. "Since she came, everything's different. Papa won't tell me anything. There are men on the roof. Is it Sciarra? Is it war?" His young face was half afraid and half thrilled, and she saw again how thoroughly they had made him one of them, how war to him was a thing to be excited by. "It's not Sciarra," Draco said, entering. "Sit down, Matteo, eat something."
You always say that. Eat something, like I'm still a kid. You are still a kid, Draco said, but gently, and he put his hand on the boy's shoulder as he passed. And Matteo subsided, the way he always did under that hand. And Alessia watched the tenderness of it and felt her heart tear cleanly down the middle. Because she wanted to stand up and scream the truth across the breakfast table. He's your father in nothing. He bought you. I'm your sister. I'm your blood. And she also, God forgive her, could not bear to be the one who took that hand away from the boy. Draco's love had raised him. Her love had only searched for him. What right did blood have against 15 years? Later, alone with her on the terrace, Draco read her face. You want to tell him, he said. He deserves to know. He deserves to be safe, Draco corrected. Those aren't the same thing, not yet. He turned to her, and the destroyed man of the night before was gone, sealed back behind the cold competence that had built an empire. Listen to me. If I tell Matteo tonight that his whole life is a lie, that his father is a stranger in New York who sold him, that his real family is a dead mother and a sister he doesn't remember, what do you think a 20-year-old raised in this world does with that? She said nothing, because she knew. He runs, Draco said, or he does something worse. He goes to find your father himself, alone, with a gun and no plan and 20 years of rage, and he dies in a stairwell in Manhattan, and I bury an empty box because there's nothing left to put in it. His jaw tightened. I have watched that exact thing happen to other men's sons. I will not watch it happen to mine. A pause. To ours. Whatever he is, I will not watch it happen to him. Ours. He had said it again, and this time it was deliberate, and it did something to her chest that she could not afford and could not stop. So what do we do? She said. We go to New York, quietly, you and I. We settle with your father before Matteo ever knows there is a father to settle with, and when it's done, when it's safe, then, together, you and I decide how the boy learns the truth. Slowly, carefully, with both of us standing beside him when the floor drops out. He looked at her. I'm asking you to trust me, Alessia. I know what I am. I know I threatened to bury you in this garden 4 days ago, but I'm asking you to trust that I love that boy enough to do the hard thing instead of the true thing. Can you? She should not have trusted him. Everything she knew about men like her father screamed not to. But this was not her father. This was a man who had just learned that the one clean thing in his life was as dirty as the rest, and who had responded not by protecting himself, but by trying to protect the child. I can try, she said. He nodded once, and then, because he was who he was, because the tenderness in him was always braided through with hunger, he closed the distance between them and took her face in his hands. There's something else, he said low, something I've been not saying for 4 days because it's a bad idea and I don't have bad ideas. But we're about to cross an ocean together, into something that might kill us both, and I've decided I'd rather die having said it. His thumbs moved along her cheekbones. From the second you walked onto my terrace and refused to be afraid of me, I have not been able to think about anything else. You are the most dangerous woman I have ever let into my life, and I want you closer than is safe for either of us. I know what you'll say, that the timing is obscene, that your brother is between us, that I raised the boy your father stole. All of it's true. His voice dropped to almost nothing, and none of it makes me want you less. Alessia's whole body had gone still, gone warm, gone treacherous. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Yes," Draco agreed. "You're my brother's whatever you are. This is insane. This is—" "Yes," he said again, and did not move away, and let her feel the pull of it, the terrible gravity, and waited, because a man like Draco Fontana did not take. He made you come to him. He made you choose the fall. And Alessia Moretti, who had used up all her fear before she ever landed in Sicily, closed the last inch and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. There was no room in either of them for gentle. 15 years of Alessia's grief and 4 days of Draco's obsession met somewhere in the middle and caught fire, and his hands moved into her hair, and hers fisted in his shirt, and the sea and the garden and the men on the walls all fell away until there was nothing in the world but the heat of his mouth and the low sound he made against her lips, half hunger, half something that sounded almost like grief. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, and Draco laughed once, quietly, a sound she had not heard from him before. "That," he said, "was a spectacularly bad idea." "You said you didn't have bad ideas." "I don't. I'm reconsidering my entire self-image." He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his grey eyes had gone soft and dark, and there was wonder in them, actual wonder, and it undid her more than any threat could have. "You should know that I don't do this. I don't—" he gestured vaguely, a man without the vocabulary. "This. Women, yes. This, no. I decided a long time ago that a man in my position who lets himself want something can be controlled by it, that the only safe thing is to want nothing." His hand slid down to rest against her throat, gentle, his thumb at the hollow where her pulse beat fast. "And then you walked in and made a liar out of me in an evening." "I don't want to be a thing you can be controlled by," Alessia said. "Too late." He said it plainly, without drama, a man reporting a fact. "You already are. That's what I'm telling you. It's already done. From here on, anyone who wants to hurt me knows exactly where to press." His jaw tightened. "Which means from here on, no one touches you. No one gets near you. I will burn Sicily to the water before I let anything—" He stopped himself, breathed. "You see? 4 days. That's what you've done to me in 4 days. Imagine what New York will do." They should have stopped there. They didn't. He kissed her again, slower this time, and it carried them off the terrace and into the cool dim of the house, and there was a wall she found her back against, and his mouth at her throat, and his hands learning her, like a language he'd waited his whole life to speak. And she let him. She pulled him closer. She stopped thinking about the plan and the ledger and the boy asleep upstairs, and let herself, for 1 hour, be nothing but a woman, being wanted by a man who wanted, like a drowning man, wants air. Afterward, tangled in the sheets of a room that was not hers, watching dawn go grey then gold at the window, she told him things she had never told anyone. About the foster homes, about the picture taped inside the closet door, about the particular loneliness of being the only person in the world who remembered a small boy's laugh, of being the sole living archive of a child everyone else had agreed to forget. And Draco listened, really listened, still and complete, the way she suspected he did everything. And when she was done, he pulled her against his chest and held her, and she felt his heart under her ear,
steady, alive. "I'm going to tell you something," he said into her hair, "and you're going to think it's the darkness in me talking. But it isn't. It's the clearest thing I know." A pause. "Your father is going to die for this. Not because he sold your brother to me, though that alone would be enough. Because he made a little girl stand at the top of the stairs and watch. Because he took your childhood and your mother's last years and folded them into a payment against goods delivered. He is going to die, Alessia. The only thing left to decide is whether it's my hand or yours." She was quiet a long time. Outside, birds had begun. The impossible day was starting. "I used to dream about it," she admitted, "killing him. When I was young, I'd fall asleep planning it." She traced the old ink on his chest, a serpent, of course, coiled over his heart. "And then I got older, and I thought, if I do that, I become him. I become the thing that this world makes. And I didn't want to give him that too, my soul on top of everything else he took." Draco's arms tightened. "Then it will be my hand," he said simply. "My soul is already gone. It was gone long before you got here. You can keep yours. Let me be the one who—" "No!" She pushed up on one elbow to look at him. "That's not— Draco, that's not how this works. You don't get to volunteer to damn yourself for me. That's just another way of making me small, of deciding what I can and can't carry." She held his gaze. "If my father dies, it will be because I chose it, with my eyes open, knowing the cost. Not because you spared me the knowing. Do you understand the difference?" He looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his face. Respect, she thought, and under it a deepening of the hunger. Because a man like Draco had spent his whole life around people who wanted to be protected, and here was a woman who refused it, who insisted on carrying her own weight and her own damnation, and it drew him like nothing else could have. "I understand," he said. "God help me. I understand you completely. It's the most frightening thing about you." He pulled her back down against him. "We'll decide together. Everything from here. Together. That's the deal I'm offering. It's the only kind I know how to keep." And Alessia, lying in the arms of her enemy who had become something else entirely, believed him. Which was, she would realize far too late, exactly the mistake her father was counting on. Salvatore Moretti had eyes everywhere, and Alessia had forgotten that, because it is the nature of the abused to underestimate the reach of the one who taught them fear. The call came 4 days later, while Draco was arranging their passage to New York, not by his usual channels, which Chiara and 3 other families would be watching, but quietly, through a shipping contact in Genoa and a private field outside Newark. Alessia was on the terrace when her own phone, the American one she'd barely used since landing, buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Some instinct made her. "Hello, piccola." The world went cold. 15 years and the voice hadn't changed. Warm as a knife handle. Her father had always sounded kind. That was the worst of him, the kindness in the voice, while the eyes stayed dead. Piccola. Little one. He had called her that at the top of the stairs. "Stay there, piccola. Don't come down."
"Papa," she said, and hated that her body still answered to the word, hated the childhood that lurched up in her at the sound of him. "You've been busy," Salvatore said, "all the way to Sicily, asking questions, digging in old ledgers." A soft sound, almost a laugh. "You always were a stubborn girl, your mother's stubbornness. It's why I sent you to those homes, you know. You'd have made trouble here. You'd have asked exactly the questions you've gone all the way across the ocean to ask now." "You sold him." Her voice shook. She let it. There was no point pretending, not with him. "You sold Matteo. I saw the entry. The boy, goods delivered. You wrote a price on him." "I made a trade," Salvatore said, unruffled. "I was nothing, a soldier for the Gambinos, 40 and going nowhere, with a sick wife and 2 children and no future. The Fontanas needed a son. I had a spare." The casual monstrosity of it stopped her breath. In exchange, they gave me roots, recognition, a seat at a table I'd never have reached in 3 lifetimes. Everything I have, this apartment, the men, the respect, I built on that trade, on him. "He was your son." "He was 4, Salvatore said, as though that were the answer, as though the smallness of the child were the reason and not the horror. "He wouldn't remember, and he hasn't, has he?" "Fontana raised him a prince. I did the boy a favour. He'd have grown up a soldier's son in Elizabeth. Instead, he's heir to one of the oldest families in Sicily. Where's the crime, Piccola? Everyone won." Alessia gripped the balustrade until the stone bit her palm. Below her, the sea kept its ancient counsel. Somewhere in the house, Draco was making arrangements to cross an ocean and open her father's throat, and she found, listening to that warm, dead voice, that she no longer had any argument against it. "I'm going to tell him," she said. "Matteo, I'm going to tell him what you are." "No," Salvatore said, and for the first time the warmth thinned and she heard the thing underneath, the old, cold thing that had run the house of her childhood. "You're not. And I'll tell you why, and then you're going to be a good girl and get on a plane home and forget Sicily ever existed." A pause, deliberate, cruel. "Because I know where you are. I know whose bed you've been sleeping in. Draco Fontana. Cristo, you always did aim high." A soft laugh. "You think I don't have a man in that house? I've had a man in that house for 15 years, Piccola. How do you think I've slept so well? I needed to be sure the boy never remembered, never asked, never came looking. And if he did," the voice went flat, "I needed to be sure I'd know before anyone else did." The terrace tilted. A man in the house. 15 years. Someone close to Draco, close to Matteo, feeding information back across the ocean to the man who had sold the child. "You're lying," she said, but she knew he wasn't. Her father did not lie. He simply told you the parts of the truth that hurt most. "Ask yourself," Salvatore said, gentle again, gentle as the knife going in, "how I got this phone number. Ask yourself who's standing near enough to Fontana to have watched you fall into his bed and pick up your American phone off the nightstand. Ask yourself, Piccola, whether the man you've decided to trust with your brother's life has a snake in his own garden that he doesn't even know about." The smile was audible now. "And then ask yourself something harder. Whether that snake has already told me you're coming to New York. whether I'm already waiting, whether the whole thing, the ledger you found so conveniently, the story that fell into place so easily, was ever really yours to control at all.
The line went dead. Alessia stood on the terrace with the phone in her hand and the sea below her and the truth spreading through her like cold water. There was a traitor in the house of Fontana. Had been for 15 years. Someone Draco trusted. Someone Matteo loved. Someone who had watched and reported and waited and who knew already right now that Draco Fontana and Alessia Moretti were preparing to cross an ocean and walk into a room where Salvatore Moretti would be waiting for them with everything he had. She turned. Draco was standing in the open door of the house. She didn't know how long he'd been there. Long enough. His face had gone to stone, and his eyes were fixed on the phone in her hand, and when he spoke, his voice was very soft and very terrible. "Who was that?"
"My father. He called you on that phone." Draco crossed the terrace slowly. "The American phone, the one you keep on the nightstand." She watched him arrive at it, a half-second behind her, watched the same cold water spread through him. "He has that number. He knows about the phone. He knows where it sits." His jaw worked. "There is no one who knows that, but the people in this house." "He says he's had a man here for 15 years, Alessia said, "since the beginning, to make sure Matteo never remembered, never came looking." Her voice cracked. "Draco, he knew we were sleeping together. He knew about New York. He knew before we—" She stopped. "There's a snake in your garden, and he's known about it the whole time.
And I think he wanted me to know right now so that we'd tear this house apart looking for it and turn on each other instead of coming for him." Draco was silent for a long moment, and then he did something that frightened her more than any rage would have. He smiled. A thin, cold, delighted smile, the smile of a man who has finally understood the shape of a thing that has been wrong for years. 15 years, he said quietly. 15 years I've felt it. Little things. Deals that soured a day too early. Enemies who knew my roots. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself it was luck, theirs and mine. He looked at her. It was never luck. There's been a hand on the scale my whole life, and I've been too proud to see it. The smile sharpened. "Your father just made the first mistake he's made in 15 years, Alessia. He got frightened enough of losing his secret that he reached out and touched it. And now I know it's real. And now—" the grey eyes went to ice. "Now I'm going to find the hand on the scale, and I'm going to take it off my house, one finger at a time." Draco Fontana had built an empire on one principle. He trusted no one completely, and everyone a little, and he watched the seams. Now he set about unpicking every seam in his life, and Alessia watched him do it, and she understood for the first time exactly what her father had spent 15 years being afraid of. He did not rage through the house. He did not line the staff up against a wall. That was the mistake a lesser man would make, and it was, she realized, precisely what her father wanted: chaos, paranoia, a house turned against itself. Instead, Draco went quiet, quieter than she had ever seen him. He moved through the days as if nothing were wrong, ate with Matteo, laughed with him even, and only Alessia knew that behind the calm grey eyes a machine was turning, sorting 15 years of memory for the pattern, the tell, the seam. "It's someone close," he told her at night, in the dark, in the bed that had become theirs. Not a guard, not staff. They'd never have the access, the phone, the bed, knowing about New York within a day. "It's someone who sits at my table, someone I'd trust with Matteo's life." His hand moved absently through her hair, which is a very short list. "And every name on it is a name that will break something in me when I find it." "Who's on it?" He was quiet. Then, "Vincenzo, my consigliere. He's been with me 22 years, longer than I've had Matteo. He held the boy the day he came to this house." A pause. "Rocco, who runs the club. My cousin Ignazio, and—" He hesitated, and she felt it cost him. "Father Benedetto, the priest. He baptized Matteo. He hears my confession. If it's him, I don't know what's left to believe in." "4 men," Alessia said. "4 men I love," Draco said, "which is 3 more than I thought I was capable of. You've had a strange effect on me, counting them." A grim ghost of humour. "A month ago, I'd have said I loved no one. Then you walked in. And now I'm lying in the dark, cataloguing my love, so I can find out which of them wants me dead." She thought about her father's voice. "Ask yourself, who's standing near enough?" And a cold suspicion moved in her that she didn't yet want to name. "Draco," she said carefully, "what if it's not about you at all? What if the snake was never planted to watch you? My father said it, to make sure the boy never remembered. 15 years ago, he didn't care about your roots or your enemies. He cared about one thing, that Matteo never remember the yellow room, never come looking, never learn what he was." She pushed up on her elbow. The snake's job wasn't to spy on Draco Fontana. It was to guard a 4-year-old boy's silence. Everything else, the roots, the deals, that was just a spy making use of himself while he waited. But the real job, the only job, was Matteo. Draco went very still. "Which means," he said slowly, following her, "the snake is whoever has been closest to the boy. Not to me, to him. 15 years." And they looked at each other in the dark, and neither of them said the name, because the name was terrible. Because for 15 years, the man who had been closest to Matteo, closer than Draco, who ran an empire, closer than any guard, was the man who had tutored him, travelled with him, sat outside his door, taught him to shoot and to drive and to hold a fork like a Fontana. His name was Turi. He had come to the house the same winter Matteo did. Draco had hired him as the boy's minder, a quiet, watchful, endlessly patient man, and he had been so good at it, so devoted, so present, that no one had ever thought to wonder why a stranger had appeared in the same season as the child, and attached himself to the child, and never, in 15 years, left the child's side. "Tori," Draco breathed, and the word came out of him like something torn. "You didn't put him on the list," Alessia said softly. "Because he's not on my list of men who could betray me." Draco sat up, and the moonlight caught the terrible dawning on his face. He's on the list of men I'd have died to protect. He raised the boy with me. Alessia, he loves Matteo. I've seen it. 15 years. You can't fake 15 years of... You can, if it's your job, she said gently, and it was the cruelest thing she'd ever had to say. And if the boy is the only thing standing between you and the man who'd kill you for failing, maybe he does love Matteo. Maybe that's exactly why he never let him remember. Maybe he told himself he was protecting him. She swallowed. My father is very good at making people believe the cage is a kindness. He did it to me. He said he sent me away to keep me safe. Maybe he did the same to Turi. Watch the boy. Keep him from the truth, and you'll both live. Draco was already moving, out of the bed, pulling on clothes with a controlled violence that was worse than fury. I have to be sure, he said. I can't move on a man who spent 15 years beside my son on a suspicion. If I'm wrong, he stopped. If I'm wrong and I accuse Turi, and Matteo sees me turn on the one man who's been beside him his whole life, on nothing, I lose the boy anyway. Your father wins either way. He's counting on it. He turned to her, and his eyes were burning. I need proof, and I need it before your father realizes his phone call spooked us. Which means I have very little time and one chance, and I cannot afford to be wrong. Then don't move on him, Alessia said, and the plan came to her whole. Terrible, elegant, the kind of plan only her father's daughter could have devised. Feed him something, a lie only the snake would carry, and then watch where it goes. Draco stopped, looked at her, and the smile came back, the cold, delighted smile, the smile of a predator recognizing another. God, he said softly, you really are his daughter. Yes, Alessia said, but I'm on your side. Remember that, whatever happens next. I chose your side. They built the lie carefully, the way her father would have, and Alessia hated how good she was at it. The bait had to be something Salvatore Moretti would act on, something urgent enough to make the snake break routine and reach across the ocean now in a way they could catch. So Draco let it be known, quietly, to the 4 men on his list and to Turi in separate conversations, each version subtly different, so that the leak, when it came, would name its source, that he had found something. That in the old ledgers he had discovered not just the record of Matteo's purchase, but a second document, a letter, in Salvatore Moretti's own hand, laying out the whole trade in detail, naming names, dates, the Gambino captains who'd brokered it. A letter that, if it existed, could hang Salvatore Moretti not just morally, but legally, could be handed to the Americans, could end him. And to each man, Draco gave a different location for this letter. To Vincenzo, he said it was in the vault in Palermo. To Rocco, the safe at the club. To Ignazio, a bank in Lugano. To Father Benedetto, buried in the church accounts. And to Turi, last, casual, over a glass of wine while they watched Matteo swim laps in the pool that was full again, he said the letter was in the study, behind the bookcase, in the oldest ledger. The same ledger Alessia had found the entry in, the one place a man guarding Matteo's silence would have to go, to be sure. Then they waited, and they watched the phones. Draco had people even his consigliere didn't know about, because that was how a man survived 15 years with a snake in his garden. And those people watched the traffic, the calls, the patterns, for a message crossing to New York carrying the words study, or bookcase, or ledger. It took 19 hours. The message went out at 4 a.m. from a burner phone that had never been used before and would never be used again, to a number in Brooklyn that Draco's people had already flagged as belonging to a shell that belonged to a shell that belonged to Salvatore Moretti. It said, in the old Sicilian that Turi had grown up speaking, "He has found it. The study. The old book. Behind the wall. Tell me what to do." Draco read the intercept in silence. Alessia watched him read it, watched the last hope go out of him, because some part of him had held out for Turi until the very end, had wanted so badly to be wrong. 15 years, Draco said. He set the phone down with a gentleness that was worse than throwing it. He taught Matteo to swim in that pool. He carried him on his shoulders. He sat outside his door every night the boy had fever. He looked up, and his eyes were wet, and it was the first time she'd seen it, and it frightened her more than anything had. And every night he was a hand on my son's throat, keeping him from his own name, for a man in Brooklyn. He wiped his face once, roughly. "I don't know how to do this, Alessia. I've killed men, I've buried friends who turned, but I don't know how to do this. How do I take him from Matteo? How do I explain? The boy loves him." "You don't explain," Alessia said. "Not yet. Not until New York is finished and Matteo's safe." She came to him, took his face in her hands the way he'd taken hers. "We don't move on Turi, not now. Now we do the harder thing. We let him keep thinking he's safe. We let my father keep thinking his snake is intact, and we use it." Her voice was steady, and she was appalled at how steady it was. "The snake will tell my father everything we want him to know, and nothing we don't. He's not a threat anymore, Draco. He's a channel, and a channel runs both ways." Draco stared at her, and then, slowly, the grief in his face was overtaken by something else. Admiration, dark and complete. The look of a man watching the woman he loves reveal a talent for exactly the thing that damns them both. "You want to feed your own father false information," he said. "Through the man who spent 15 years poisoning my son, to walk us both into a room in New York on our terms instead of his. Yes. It could get us both killed. Yes. If Turi realizes he's been turned into a channel, if your father is even half as careful as you say, the whole thing collapses, and they'll know we know, and they'll move first." "Yes," Alessia said, "so we have to be better than them. We have to lie better than the two best liars either of us has ever known." She held his gaze. "I learned from the best, Draco. My father built me. He just never imagined I'd point it back at him." For a long moment, Draco Fontana looked at the woman in his arms. Her father's daughter, her brother's sister, his own undoing. And Alessia watched him make a decision she would spend the rest of her life being grateful for and afraid of in equal measure. "All right," he said. "We do it your way. We turn the snake into a leash, and we walk into your father's house holding the other end of it." He pulled her against him, pressed his mouth to her hair, and she felt him tremble once, a single fault line running through all that stone. "But understand me. The second Matteo is safe, the second your father is finished, I take Turi apart with my own hands. Not for me,
for 15 years of a little boy's stolen name. That's not negotiable. That's the one thing in all of this I will not let you carry. That one is mine. Alessia thought of Turi carrying her brother on his shoulders, thought of the tenderness that might even have been real, and found she had no argument and did not want one. That one's yours, she agreed. The next 10 days were a war fought entirely in whispers. They fed Turi carefully, the way you feed a fire you intend to control. Never too much, never too obviously, always something that fit what he already believed. They let him overhear that Draco and Alessia would fly to New York on the 14th, commercial, through JFK, arriving in the evening. They let him see the tickets. They let Matteo mention, guilelessly, that his father had gone quiet and strange and was talking about settling old business in America. Every word of it went to Brooklyn, and Draco's watchers tracked every message, and slowly, message by message, Salvatore Moretti's plans took shape on the other end of the leash. Because a channel runs both ways. Salvatore, believing his snake intact, believing he had eyes in the house, grew confident, and confidence made him talk to his snake, and his snake's replies, which Draco's people now intercepted before Turi ever received them, told them everything. That Salvatore would have men at JFK, that he meant to take Alessia alive and Draco dead in that order in the chaos of arrivals, that he had reached out to Sciarra in Palermo to move on the Fontana holdings the moment Draco was confirmed dead, so that the empire would already be dismembered before the body was cold. "He's not just going to kill me," Draco said, reading it in the study, in the dead of night. "He's going to erase me, take the boy, take the holdings, take you, and leave nothing behind but a story about a Sicilian don who got greedy and went to America and never came home." He looked almost impressed. "It's a good plan. It's a very good plan. It's the plan I would make." "So we don't fly commercial through JFK," Alessia said. "No, we let Turi believe we do. His men will be at JFK, and we'll be somewhere else entirely." Draco spread a map across the desk, not of New York, but of the whole board. The way she was learning, he saw everything, all at once, all the pieces. "Here's what your father doesn't know. He doesn't know that his snake is my leash. He doesn't know that everything Turi has told him for 10 days is a story I wrote. And most of all, the cold smile, he doesn't know that I'm not coming to New York to negotiate, or to threaten, or even to kill him. I'm coming to take everything he has, the roots he bought with your brother, the seat at the table, all of it. I'm going to make him poor and small and forgotten. And then, at the very end, when he has nothing left, I'm going to let you decide whether he lives." Alessia looked at the map, at the pieces, at the man. "And Matteo?" Draco's face changed. "Matteo stays here, guarded, safe. And Turi," he paused, "Turi comes with us to New York." "What?" "Think about it." Draco tapped the map. "If Turi stays here with Matteo, and we go without him, he'll know something's wrong. He's never been away from the boy at a moment of danger. And if we're going to spring a trap on your father, we need the snake where we can see him, not 2,000 miles behind us with access to my son." So he comes, as Matteo's minder, coming to protect the family's interests. He'll think he's coming to help your father kill me.
And when it all turns, the smile again, he'll be standing in the room when it does, and your father will watch his own snake get turned inside out in front of him. I want Salvatore to see it. I want him to understand, in the last hour of his power, that the girl he threw away built the knife that gutted him. It was monstrous. It was beautiful. It was, Alessia understood, love. Draco's kind of love. The only kind he had, expressed in the only language he spoke, which was the language of power and vengeance and absolute protection. He was building her a weapon out of her own history. He was handing her the whole apparatus of his terrible life and saying, "Here, this is yours. Use it. I built it, and now it's yours." "There's a problem," she said. "Matteo." "If we all go, you, me, Turi, and leave him here. He's 20, Draco. He's proud. He'll follow. The second he realizes the family's at war in America and he's been left behind like a child, he'll come. He came to the club when you told him not to. He'll come to New York if he has to swim." Draco went still, because she was right, and he knew she was right, and it was the one variable in his perfect plan that he could not fully control. The willful, wounded, half-made heart of a young man who had spent his whole life being protected and had begun to hate it. "Then we tell him something," Draco said slowly. "Not the truth, but something. Enough to keep him here. Enough to make staying feel like his choice instead of his cage." "There's only one thing that would keep him here," Alessia said quietly, and she felt the ground shift under her as she said it, felt the whole careful structure of "not yet, not until he's safe" begin to crack. One thing worth staying for. One person he'd stay to protect. She looked at Draco. "Me. If I tell him the truth. If I tell him who I am, if I tell him that I'm his sister and that our father is the man in New York, and that I need him to stay in Sicily and be safe because I've already lost him once and I can't do it again." Her voice broke. "He'd stay. To protect me. He'd hate it, but he'd stay. Because that's who he is. You raised him to protect the people he loves." She wiped her eyes furiously. "I just have to make him love me first. In 10 days. After 15 years. I have to make my brother love me enough to obey me." Draco reached across the map and took her hand. "Then you'd better start tonight," he said gently. "Go find your brother, Alessia. Go get your family back. And I'll go get ready to burn your father's world to the ground." She found Matteo where she always found him when the house grew tense, on the lower terrace, feet in the pool, a cigarette he didn't really smoke burning down between his fingers, a boy making himself small out of a habit older than his memory. "Everyone's whispering again," he said without turning. "Turi's packing. Papa's got that face. And you," now he looked at her, "you've got a face too. Like you're about to jump off something." He flicked the cigarette away. "What is it? What's happening? And don't tell me to eat something." Alessia sat down beside him on the pool's edge. The water was black and warm and held the reflected stars. She had rehearsed this on the plane. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, last week, she had rehearsed it her whole life. And now that the moment was here, she found every rehearsed word
had turned to ash, and all she had left was the truth, unarmed. "I'm going to tell you a story," she said, "and I need you to let me finish it before you say anything. Can you do that?" He looked at her, wary, young. "Okay." "There was a little boy," Alessia said, "who lived in an apartment in a town called Elizabeth, in New Jersey, in America. He was 4 years old. He had a big sister who was 11.
Their mother had painted their bedroom yellow before she got sick, and at night she used to sing them an old song, a Neapolitan lullaby about a fisherman and the moon." She watched his face. The little boy had a plastic dinosaur he wouldn't sleep without, green, one eye chewed off, and he had a gap between his front teeth, and he laughed at everything, and his sister loved him more than anything in the whole world. Matteo had gone very still. "One morning," she said, and her voice began to shake, and she let it. "Their father came home smelling of cigars, and he went into the yellow room, and he picked the little boy up out of his crib, and he carried him down the stairs. And the sister watched from the top step because she'd been told to stay there. And there was a black car waiting at the curb, and their father put the little boy in the car. The stars swam in the black water. And the last thing the sister ever saw of her brother was his hand, pressed against the back window, sliding down as the car drove away." "Stop," Matteo said. His voice had gone strange. "He was sold," Alessia said, "traded for power to a family in Sicily who wanted a son. The sister spent 15 years in foster homes with his picture taped inside her closet door. Their mother died 4 years later, thinking he was somewhere in the world, not knowing her name. And the sister taught herself Italian, and she saved money, and she followed the trade through every drunk cousin and dirty ledger until she found the name of the family who'd bought him." She turned to face him fully. "Fontana." Matteo was shaking his head, slow, mechanical. "No." "The yellow room, Matteo. The singing. You told me. The first night. You said you sometimes think you remember a yellow room and someone singing, and Papa told you it was just a dream, that you were born here." She was crying now, openly. 15 years of it. It wasn't a dream. It was the last thing you had left of her, of us, and they told you it wasn't real. "Stop it!" He was on his feet. "Why are you— This is a lie. This is some— Papa said you'd try to—" But he couldn't finish, because Draco had never said any such thing, because the truth had already gone into him the way truth does, past all the defences, straight to the 4-year-old who had never stopped listening for a lullaby. "Your name was Matteo Moretti," Alessia said, standing too quietly, letting him have his fury because it was better than the alternative. "You still are, Matteo. That part they didn't steal. Our mother named you, and I'm—" Her voice finally broke completely. "I'm Alessia. I'm your sister. I've been looking for you for 15 years, and I found you. And I'm so sorry it took so long. I'm so sorry I let them take you. I was 11, and I was at the top of the stairs, and I've hated myself for 15 years for not running down and—" "Stop," Matteo said again, but it came out broken now, and the fury had drained and left something rawer, and he was staring at her the way you stare at a word in a language you'd forgotten you knew. "The song," he said. "You said there was a song." Alessia opened her mouth, and she sang it, the old lullaby,
the one she could hum but had thought she'd lost the words to, except that here, now, with her brother's eyes on her, the words came, in the dialect their mother had used, cracked and off-key and 15 years too late. Dorme, dorme, picceri, ca luna te sta a guardar. And Matteo made a sound she would never forget, a sound like something breaking and mending at once, and his knees went, and Alessia caught him, and they went down together onto the wet stone at the edge of the black pool, and her brother, 20 years old, a prince of a criminal empire, a boy who had been taught to feel nothing, wept against her shoulder, like the 4-year-old who had pressed his hand to the back window of a black car. "I remember," he said, into her shoulder, wrecked. "Alessia, I remember. The dinosaur. I called it Rex," she whispered, holding him, rocking him. 15 years, finally, over. "You called it Rex." "Rex," Matteo said, and laughed and sobbed at once. "Oh, God, Rex, you're real. You're real. You came back." "I came back," Alessia said. "I came back for you, and I'm never leaving you again." Above them, unseen at the terrace rail, Draco Fontana stood in the dark and watched the sister he had given her find the brother he had raised, and felt the ground of his own carefully guarded heart give way completely, and understood, with the clarity of a man who has finally found something worth being destroyed for, that he would kill the entire world before he let anyone take this from either of them again. Matteo did not take it the way Draco had feared. He took it worse, and then better, and then in a way none of them had planned for. The worse came first, in the hour after the pool, when the shock curdled into rage, and the rage found its target. "He sold me?" Matteo was pacing the study, wild, and Draco stood very still and let him. "Our father, your father," he couldn't yet call him his own. "He wrote a price? And he's alive? In New York? Right now?" He rounded on Draco. "And you knew? How long have you known?" 11 days, Draco said, since Alessia found the ledger. 11 days? And you didn't tell me? I've been swimming in that pool for 11 days, and you knew. The betrayal in his voice was terrible, and Alessia saw it land on Draco like a blow, because this, exactly this, was the thing Draco had spent 15 years afraid of. "I didn't tell you," Draco said quietly, "because I have loved you since the day you came to this house, and I was not born to you, and every single day I have been afraid that you would learn how you came to me, and it would take you from me. And when I finally learnt the truth, that you were stolen, that everything I built our life on was a lie a man sold me, I had a choice. Tell you the truth, and watch you run to New York with a gun and die in a stairwell, or protect you one more time, one last time, and hate myself for the silence." His voice was rough. "I chose you over the truth. I've always chosen you over the truth. If that's unforgivable, then don't forgive me. But don't ever think it wasn't love." Matteo stared at him, and the rage broke, the way it always broke under that steadiness, and the boy who had two fathers now, one who bought him and one who kept him, one in New York and one in front of him, chose in that moment the only way a heart can choose, which is entirely and without accounting. "You're my father," Matteo said, and his voice cracked. "The one in New York, he's nothing. He's a name in a book. You're my father." He looked at Alessia. "And you're my sister, and she's—" He gestured between them, understanding suddenly, the way the young understand these things all at once. "Wait, you two. Are you—" Alessia felt her face heat. Draco did not flinch. "Yes," Draco said. Matteo looked from one to the other, and something complicated crossed his face, and then, astonishingly, he laughed. A real laugh, cracked and wet, but real.
God, my sister and you, this family. He wiped his face. This is insane. This is completely insane. And then the laughter died, and the young man came up through the boy, and Alessia saw the thing they'd been counting on and dreading in equal measure. "I'm coming to New York." "No," Draco and Alessia said together. "He sold me. He's the reason I don't remember my own mother's face. And you think I'm going to sit in Sicily by the pool while you two go settle it?" Matteo's jaw set, and it was Draco's jaw. 15 years of imitation made flesh. "I'm not a child. You raised me to be one of you, both of you, so let me be one of you. This is my debt. He's my blood. I have more right to be in that room than anyone." And here it was, the variable Draco couldn't control, the willful heart, arriving exactly on schedule. Alessia crossed to her brother. She took his face in her hands, the gesture that had become the language of this strange family, and she made him look at her. "Listen to me," she said. "I need you to hear this, not as a warning, but as the truest thing I know. I lost you once. I stood at the top of the stairs, and I watched the car take you, and I couldn't do anything. And I have carried that for 15 years. Her voice was steady and low. "If you come to New York and something happens to you, if I have to lose you a second time, now, when I've just gotten you back, it will end me, Matteo. Not hurt me, end me. There won't be anything left." She held his gaze. "Our father is counting on you being reckless, on the rage. He wants you in that room because a grieving, furious 20-year-old is the easiest thing in the world to use. If you come, you don't hurt him. You hand him a weapon, and the weapon is you." Matteo's eyes filled. "So I do nothing?" "No," Alessia said. "You do the hardest thing. You stay. You keep this house. You keep yourself. The one thing they stole and the one thing I got back, safe. Because if I know you're here, whole, alive, waiting, then I can walk into that room in New York and do what has to be done, without being afraid. You staying isn't you doing nothing, Matteo. You staying is the thing that lets me be brave." She pressed her forehead to his. "Give me that, please. Give me a reason to come home." For a long moment the young man wrestled with it, every instinct they'd raised into him screaming to fight, to protect, to be in the room. And Alessia held her breath, because this was the whole hinge of it, and if he refused, there was no plan left. "You come home," Matteo said finally, fierce, wet-eyed. "Both of you. You come home, or I swear to God I'll come find you, and I don't care what's waiting. You understand? This time I'm not the one who gets left. This time you come back." I promise, Alessia said. Swear it on the song, Matteo said. Mama's song. Swear it on that. And Alessia, undone, swore it on their mother's lullaby, and her brother pulled her into his arms and held her the way she'd held him at the pool, and over his shoulder she met Draco's eyes, and she saw in them the thing she was only just learning to name in herself, that this broken, beautiful, impossible family, stitched together out of a 15-year-old crime, was the only thing either of them had ever had worth dying to protect. And that in 3 days they were going to New York to find out if they'd survive it. They did not fly commercial through JFK, where her father's men were waiting. They flew private into a small field in New Jersey, the same state where it had all begun. And Alessia looked down at the grid of lights coming up through the dark and thought about a yellow room in a town called Elizabeth, and about a black car at a curb, and about how a life could bend all the way around and bring you back to where it broke you. Turi came with them. That was the strangest part, sitting across the narrow cabin from the man who had spent 15 years as a knife against her brother's memory, watching him be ordinary, be kind, ask if she was warm enough, tell a dry joke that made Draco almost smile out of 15 years of habit. He did not know he was a leash. He believed he was flying to New York to help engineer the murder of Draco Fontana and the delivery of Alessia to her father. He believed his masters were about to win. And he sat there, being gentle. And Alessia understood something about the world she wished she didn't. That the most dangerous people are not the ones who feel nothing, but the ones who feel a great deal and betray you anyway, and tell themselves the whole time that they're being kind. "You're quiet," Turi said to her over the drone of the engines. "Frightened?" "A little," Alessia said, which was true, and which was also exactly what her father's spy should report. "Don Fontana will protect you," Turi said, and his eyes were warm, and the warmth was real, and that was the horror of it. "He protects what's his. I've watched him do it for 15 years. A pause. "Whatever's waiting in New York, stay close to him. That's my advice. Stay close to Draco Fontana and let no one separate you." It was, Alessia realized, an instruction. Her father wanted her close to Draco at the critical moment so that his men could take them together, kill the one, and seize the other. And Turi was delivering the instruction, gift-wrapped as tenderness. She smiled at him, and thanked him, and thought, "You have no idea, old man, that the girl you're steering is steering you." Draco had a place in the city, of course. A penthouse near the top of a black glass tower in Midtown, 60 floors above the street, a place his American interests had maintained for years, and which her father's people, they had confirmed through the leash, believed Draco knew nothing about the compromise of, which meant her father thought he knew where they'd be, which meant that was exactly where they let Turi believe they were going, while the real work happened somewhere else entirely. Because Draco's plan had never been about a confrontation. Confrontations were for men with less imagination. Draco's plan was quieter and infinitely crueler. And Alessia had helped him build it on the long flight over. And it went like this. For 15 years, Salvatore Moretti's power had rested on the roots and relationships he'd bought with Matteo. Those roots ran through people, captains, brokers, launderers, a dozen men who moved product and money and violence up and down the eastern seaboard, and who obeyed Salvatore because Salvatore had, once, long ago,
been given a seat at the table by the Fontanas of Sicily.
That seat was the foundation of everything he was. And here was the thing her father had never understood, because he'd thrown Matteo away and never looked back. The Fontanas of Sicily had given that seat. And what one Fontana gives, another can take. Draco had spent 10 days, through channels Salvatore's snake never saw, quietly reaching every one of those dozen men. Not with threats, with proof. The ledger, the record of the trade, the truth of what Salvatore Moretti was, not a made man who'd earned his seat, but a father who'd sold his 4-year-old son for it. A man whose entire standing rested on a crime so contemptible that even in a world built on crime, it curdled the stomach. In that world, certain lines existed precisely because everything else was permitted. You could kill a man. You could not sell your own child like a case of wine. It was the one thing that made you not a man at all. By the time we walk into a room with your father, Draco had told her, he won't have anyone left. His captains will already know. His brokers will already have decided which way the wind blows. I'm not going to New York to take his power, Alessia. I'm going to New York to let him watch it have already left him, to watch the room empty out, to see the exact moment his men look at him and see, for the first time, what he really is. The cold smile. Killing him would be a mercy. I'd rather he lived, poor, named, with every man who ever respected him knowing he sold his son. That's the sentence I want. That's the sentence he earned. But plans, Alessia was learning, were things you made so that the world could break them. Because as the car carried them from the field into the glittering canyon of the city, her phone buzzed. Not the American phone, the one her father had compromised, but a second one Draco had given her, clean, known to no one. It was a text from Matteo. Someone was here, at the house. Not Sciarra's men, ours, Turi's cousin and 2 others. They took the boat from the dock at 3 a.m. I followed on the other one. I'm not in Sicily anymore, Alessia. I'm sorry. I couldn't stay. I'm coming to you. Don't be angry. I couldn't be the one who got left again. Alessia's blood turned to ice. Draco, she said. He read it over her shoulder. She felt him go absolutely still, felt the whole engine of the plan seize, because the one variable he could not control had just done the one thing that unravelled everything. And worse, far worse, Turi's own people had left the house at 3 a.m. Which meant the snake had known Matteo would break, had counted on it, had a plan for it that ran underneath Draco's plan the whole time. They let him follow, Draco said, very quietly, and his voice had gone to a place she'd never heard. Your father let Matteo come. He wanted the boy here all along. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Draco Fontana looked afraid. It was never a trap for me, Alessia, or for you. We walked into it thinking we were the prize. We're not. Matteo is. Your father doesn't want to kill me. He wants his property back. He wants the son he sold before the son can ever testify to what he is. Everything Draco had built, the 10 days of proof, the emptied room, the elegant, slow ruin, collapsed in the space of a text message because none of it mattered now. Salvatore Moretti didn't care about his roots or his seat or his standing if the price of keeping his secret was letting Matteo live to tell it. And Matteo, 20 years old and unable to be the one left behind, had put himself in a boat in the dark and sailed straight into his father's hands. Where is he? Alessia said. Where would they take him? Draco was already on the clean phone, low and fast in Sicilian, his people moving. Turi's cousin took the boat. That's a Fontana crew turned, which means they'll bring him somewhere I own, somewhere they think I won't look because it's mine. His eyes moved, calculating, and then stopped. The warehouse. Red Hook, Brooklyn. It's mine on paper. It was one of the properties I bought with the roots I got from... He stopped. Understanding arrived on his face like a wound. From the same seat at the table your father sits at. Alessia. That warehouse. It's part of the original arrangement. It's where the trade was made. 15 years ago. Brooklyn. Goods delivered. The ledger entry. Goods delivered, per agreement, Brooklyn. He's taking Matteo back to the place he sold him, Alessia whispered. The symmetry of it was so cruel, it felt designed. And she understood in a rush that it was, that her father was not just recovering his property, but staging something, closing a circle, making a point. He's going to do it in the same room. Do what? Draco said. But he knew, and she knew, and neither of them said it, because to say it was to make it real. That Salvatore Moretti intended to erase the one witness to his crime, and that the witness was the child he'd sold, and that he meant to end where he'd begun. Turi was watching them from across the car. He had gone very still, the warmth gone out of his face, and Alessia realized he'd heard enough. Warehouse, Red Hook, Matteo, and that the leash they'd held for 10 days had just gone taut in the other direction. Because whatever else Turi was, he was a professional. And a professional knows the exact moment the game has changed. You know, Turi said quietly, not a question. He was looking at Draco. You've known. About me. His hand had not yet moved toward his jacket, but the whole air in the car had changed. How long? 10 days, Draco said. He hadn't moved either. 2 predators in a small space, each measuring the other. Since the night you told Brooklyn about the letter in the study, there was no letter, Turi. There never was. You've been feeding your master a story I wrote. Something crossed Turi's face, not fear, grief. The boy, he said. You have to understand about the boy. I never... His voice caught, and it was real. All of it was real. That was the unbearable thing. 15 years I watched him. I taught him to swim. I sat outside his door, and every night I told myself I was protecting him, that if he never remembered, he'd never come looking, and if he never came looking, Salvatore would never have to... He stopped. I loved him. That's not a lie. I loved that boy like my own. I loved my own life more. God forgive me. I loved my own life more, and I told myself the two things weren't in conflict for 15 years, and now... His eyes were wet. Now Salvatore has him in Red Hook, and I know exactly what that means, and I've spent 15 years making it possible. The car was doing 80 now, weaving through Brooklyn-bound traffic, and no one had drawn a weapon, and the whole terrible confession hung in the recycled air. Then help us, Alessia said. Both men looked at her. You want to be forgiven, she said to Turi, and her voice was hard, her father's daughter after all. You won't be. Not by me, not by Matteo, not by God. 15 years is 15 years, and there's no absolution that buys it back. But you can do one thing that matters more than being forgiven, You can help us get him out of that room alive. You know my father's men. You know how he thinks. You know the warehouse. You've been his hand for 15 years, so be his hand one more time, wrong way round, and help us take him apart." She leaned forward. "Not for you, for the boy you say you loved. If it was ever true, if 1 hour of it in 15 years was true, then you owe him this. Not your love, your treachery." Turned around and pointed at the man you served. Turi looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something that would haunt Alessia for the rest of her life. He took out his phone, his own phone, the burner, the one he thought no one knew about, and he handed it to Draco. "There's a number in there," he said, hollow. "Salvatore's real number, the one only I have. And there's a word." He swallowed. "A word he taught me 15 years ago. If I ever needed to reach him in an emergency and prove it was me, I use the word, and he does whatever I ask, no questions, because it means the arrangement is at risk." He looked up. "You want to walk into that warehouse on your terms? Let me call him. Let me tell him the word. Let me tell him I've turned Alessia, that I have her, that I'm bringing her in myself. And let me bring you instead. All of you, right into the room. And when we're inside—" His jaw set, and for 1 second the man who might have existed if he'd chosen differently showed through. "I'll put myself between him and the boy. That's the one thing I have left to give. I'll be the body in the way." Draco looked at the phone, at Turi, at Alessia. "Why?" he said. "Why would you do that?" And Turi, the snake, the traitor, the man who had stolen a child's name for 15 years, said the truest thing anyone said in all of it. "Because I taught him to swim," he said simply. "And I would rather die than watch him drown." The warehouse sat at the edge of the water where Brooklyn ran out into the harbour, a long brick shell from another century, and behind it the lights of Manhattan burned like a promise no one had ever intended to keep. Rain had started, fine and cold, silvering the cobbles, and Alessia stood in the dark across the street between Draco and Turi and looked at the building where her father had sold her brother 15 years ago, and where he now meant to unmake him. "2 on the door," Turi murmured, reading the shapes in the rain. "2 more inside the loading bay. Salvatore will be at the back, near the water. He always keeps the water behind him. A way out." He pulled the burner phone from his coat. "I make the call now. After that there's no turning back. Once I say the word, we walk in as his people. If either of you shows fear, if the boy shows he knows me for what I am, it ends in seconds." "Make the call," Draco said. Turi dialed. Alessia watched him lift the phone to his ear, watched 15 years of loyalty and betrayal collapse into a single point. And when her father's voice came on the line, she couldn't hear the words, only the tone, warm, warm as a knife handle. She felt her whole childhood rise in her throat. "It's me," Turi said, in Sicilian, and then the word, a word Alessia didn't know, an old word, harsh. She saw the change in Turi's shoulders, the practiced ease sliding over him like a second skin. "I have the girl. I turned her days ago. She trusts me. She thinks I'm helping her. Fontana suspects nothing. I'm bringing them both in myself. Yes, both. Have your men stand down at the door. They'll spook if they see strangers. Let me walk them in." A pause. "The boy. Is the boy—"
His voice didn't change, but Alessia saw his hand tighten white on the phone. Good. Keep him whole until I'm inside. I want to be there. After 15 years, Salvatore, I've earned that much. I want to be in the room. He ended the call, lowered the phone, and for a moment he was just an old man in the rain who had run out of road. He's alive, Turi said. The boy's alive. Salvatore's waiting for... He couldn't finish. He wants to do it with all of us there. He wants Alessia to watch. It's the same as the stairs 15 years ago. He wants her at the top of the stairs again. He looked at her. He's a man who can only feel powerful when someone he owns is watching him take something away. Alessia thought of the top step, the black car, the hand sliding down the glass, and something in her that had been 11 years old for 15 years finally, quietly, stood up. Then let's give him his audience, she said. They went in through the loading bay, the three of them, Turi in front, with Alessia's arm gripped in his hand. A performance, but her heart didn't know it was a performance and slammed against her ribs regardless. And Draco, a half-step behind, hands loose, unarmed to the eye, a man walking to his own execution. The warehouse opened into a vast, dim cathedral of a space. Iron pillars marching into shadow, the river slapping at the pilings below the far wall, where a loading door stood open to the black water and the rain. And there, in a pool of work-light near the water, stood Salvatore Moretti. 15 years, and he had barely aged. That was the obscene thing. He was silver now, elegant, in a coat that cost more than a car, and he stood with his hands in his pockets and his dead, kind eyes, and he smiled when he saw her. Actually smiled. The smile of a father welcoming home a daughter. "Piccola," Salvatore said, "look how beautiful you turned out." And behind him, on his knees on the concrete, wrists bound, a bruise blooming on his cheekbone, but his eyes blazing. Matteo, alive, furious, 20 years old and looking at the father who sold him for the first time with full knowledge of what he was. "Let him go," Alessia said, "in a moment." Salvatore's gaze moved past her to Draco, and something flickered. Satisfaction, hunger, the pleasure of a man seeing a rival delivered. "Don Fontana, you're smaller than I imagined. 15 years I've paid a man to keep my secret in your house, and here you are, walked right into my hands by that same man. Do you know what that makes you?" He took a step. "It makes you a fool who thought he was a king, the most expensive kind." "It makes me curious," Draco said, easy, unhurried. And Alessia marvelled at him, at the ice of him. "Because you had it all, Salvatore. The roots, the seat, 15 years of getting away with it. And you risked every bit of it, crossed an ocean, exposed your snake, dragged your own son to the place you sold him for what? To tie up one loose end?" He tilted his head. "That's not the move of a king either. That's the move of a frightened man. What are you so afraid of?" "You," Salvatore said, and for 1 second the mask slipped and the real thing showed through. Not power, not cruelty, but naked terror. The terror of a man who has built a life on a single buried thing and felt the ground shift. You and your ledger and your 10 days of phone calls to my captains. You think I don't know? You think I don't have men in your operation the way I have men in your house? He laughed, and it was ragged. You told them what I did. You told them about the boy. And now every man who ever knelt to me is deciding whether I'm still a man at all. You didn't come to kill me, Fontana. You came to unmake me. So yes, I dragged the boy here, because the boy is the proof. The boy is the only thing that turns a rumour into a fact. And a rumour I can survive. His hand came out of his pocket, and there was a gun in it, and it was pointed at Matteo's head. A fact I cannot. "Papa, don't!" Alessia started, the word out before she could stop it, the childhood word, and she hated it, and Salvatore's eyes came to her and softened horribly. "You see," he said, "you still call me that. 15 years, and it's still in you. That's blood, Piccola. That's what blood does. It stays." The gun didn't waver. "Come here. Come stand by me. Come watch, the way you watched before. And when it's done, you'll understand. I'm not the monster. I'm just a man who does the necessary thing. Your Don over there, he does it too. The only difference is he's convinced you he does it for love." His finger tightened. "There's no such thing as doing it for love, Piccola. There's only doing it. Now come watch me tie up my loose end, and then it's just you and me and Fontana, and we'll see who walks out to the water." Time did the thing it does in the last seconds before violence. It thickened, slowed, went crystalline, and Alessia saw everything at once. She saw Matteo on his knees, and she saw him not begging, not weeping, but staring up at Salvatore with a terrible young defiance. And she understood that her brother had decided to die well, to spit at the man rather than plead, and it broke something in her, because it was the bravest and stupidest thing, and it was so exactly what Draco had made him. She saw Draco, motionless, a half-step behind her, and she felt, rather than saw, the coil in him, the readiness, and she knew he was calculating distance and angle, and the two men by the door, and the gun at Matteo's head, and that he was fast, faster than anyone she'd ever seen, but not faster than a bullet already aimed. And she saw Turi, who still had his hand gripped on her arm, the performance of the loyal snake bringing his master a prize. Turi, who leaned in close to her ear as if to shove her forward toward her father, and who whispered, so low it was almost breath, 3 words: "When I move." And then Turi moved. He did not go for the gun. That was what Salvatore would have expected, what the men by the door were braced for. He went forward, not at Salvatore, but at Matteo, and he threw himself the last 6 feet in a way no man his age should have been able to, and he came down over the boy, over her brother, covering him, wrapping him, putting his body between Matteo and the gun, exactly as he'd promised in the car, a body in the way. Salvatore's gun went off. The sound was enormous in the iron cathedral, and Alessia screamed, and Turi's body jerked, and for one endless instant she thought it was over, thought she'd watched her brother die a second time. But Draco was already moving. The instant Salvatore's attention and aim snapped to Turi's lunge, Draco crossed the space between them like something uncoiling, and he hit Salvatore low and hard, and the second shot went wide into the dark. And then the 2 men were down on the concrete, and it was not elegant, it was not choreographed, it was 2 dangerous men trying to kill each other with their hands in the rain light.
The men by the door came off the wall and found, to their shock, that they had somewhere else to be, because Draco Fontana had not walked into this warehouse alone, had never walked anywhere alone, and the shadows at the edges of the great room came alive with his people, who had come up from the water while Turi made the call, and the loading bay filled with the flat, ugly percussion of it. Alessia did not watch the men. She ran to her brother. Turi lay half over Matteo, and there was blood, dark and spreading on the concrete, and Alessia hauled the old man's weight off, and her brother was underneath, alive, whole, unhurt, staring up at her with huge, shocked eyes. And the blood was Turi's. All Turi's. The bullet had gone into the old man's back and out somewhere it shouldn't have, and Turi was looking up at the iron ceiling with an expression Alessia would never be able to forget. Not pain. Relief. Turi, Matteo's voice cracked. He got his bound hands somehow to the old man's face. Turi, no. Why did you taught you to swim, Turi said, blood at the corner of his mouth. His hand found Matteo's, fumbling, and gripped. First thing I ever taught you. You were so scared of the water. A wet cough. 15 years I lied to you, figure, every day, about who you were, about your mother. I let a man in Brooklyn own your whole life, and I called it protecting you. His eyes swam, found the boy's face. This is the only true thing I ever did for you. Remember me for this one. Not the rest. Just this one. His hand slackened. Just this one. And Turi, the snake, the traitor, the man who had stolen 15 years of a child's name and given his life back in a single second, went still on the cold floor of the warehouse in Red Hook, and Matteo, her brother, who had wanted to die well and instead had been made to watch someone die for him, put his bound hands over his face and made a sound Alessia felt in her own chest. She got her brother free. Someone's dropped knife, the bindings cut, and she pulled Matteo up and back, away from the centre of the room, where Draco and her father were still down and locked and murderous on the concrete. And then it was just the two of them, Draco and Salvatore, because Draco's people had finished the men by the door, and everyone else in that room had gone still to watch, the way people go still to watch a fire. Draco was on top. He had Salvatore's gun hand pinned, and the gun had skittered away into the dark, and he had one forearm across the older man's throat, and Salvatore Moretti was clawing at it and going purple, and Draco's face was a thing Alessia had never seen and hoped never to see again. Not rage, but a cold and total absence, the face of a man doing arithmetic with another man's life. Draco, Alessia said. He didn't hear her, or he heard her and didn't stop. Draco. And she remembered, in that moment, the thing she'd told him in the dark of a bedroom in Sicily a lifetime ago. You don't get to volunteer to damn yourself for me. If my father dies, it will be because I chose it, with my eyes open. She walked to them. She knelt down in her father's blood and Turi's blood, in the ruin of everything, and she put her hand on Draco Fontana's arm, the arm across her father's throat, and she felt him shaking with the effort of the thing he was doing, and she said, quietly, only for him, "Stop. Let me choose. You promised me I'd get to choose." And Draco Fontana, the cold, dangerous, obsessed man who had threatened to bury her in his garden, who had learned to want when he'd sworn never to want again, stopped. He eased the forearm off. He looked at her, and his eyes came back from wherever they'd gone, and he moved aside, and he gave her the thing he'd wanted to take from her, because he loved her enough to let her carry her own damnation. And Alessia Moretti knelt over her gasping, purple, defeated father, in the place where he'd sold her brother. And she looked into the dead, kind eyes, and she found out at last what she'd chosen. "Do it," Salvatore rasped. He was laughing, or trying to, blood and spit at the corner of his mouth. "Go on, Piccola. You've got the whole room watching. It's what you came for. 15 years. Do it, and become me. That's the only inheritance I've got left to give you, and God knows you've earned it." His eyes glittered. "You think there's another way to end this? There isn't. There's only the water and the gun and the blood. The way there always is. Fontana knows. Your snake knew. Now you know. Do it." Alessia looked at him. She had rehearsed this too, on the plane 15 years ago, falling asleep planning it in the foster homes. She had 100 versions of this moment, and in every one of them she'd wanted, more than she'd ever wanted anything, to close her hands around his kind, dead throat and finish it. And now the moment was here, and she found the want was gone. Not because she forgave him, she would never forgive him. Not because he didn't deserve it, he deserved the water and the gun, and worse. But because she finally understood the thing he'd said, and understood that it was the one true thing he'd ever taught her, and that he'd taught it to her by accident. There's only doing it. He was a man who could only feel real when he was taking something from someone who was watching. And if she killed him now, in front of this room, over her brother and over Turi's body, she would not be ending him. She'd be joining him. She'd be proving him right. She'd be his daughter completely and forever, the top of the stairs made permanent, a Moretti who did the necessary thing and called it necessary. And she would not give him that. She would not give him the last thing he wanted, which was to remake her in his image on his way out. "No," Alessia said. Salvatore's face flickered. "No," she said again, louder, so the whole room heard it, so her brother heard it. "I'm not going to kill you." She leaned close, and she said the thing she'd crossed an ocean and 15 years to say, and it wasn't a curse, and it wasn't a scream. It was quiet, and it was final. "You sold your son for a seat at a table, and now every man who ever knelt to you knows it. You're not going to die tonight, Papa. You're going to live. You're going to live as the man who sold his 4-year-old boy. In this world, that's the one thing you don't come back from. You'll have your name, and it'll follow you into every room, and no one will ever look at you again without knowing." She stood up. "You don't get the water and the gun. Those are for men who still had something left to lose. You get to live with what you are. That's my inheritance. I'm giving it back." She turned to Draco. "Take everything," she said. "The roots, the seat, all of it. The way you planned. Leave him alive and poor and named.
Let the world do to him what he deserves, slowly, for the rest of his life. Her voice didn't shake. That's what I choose. For a moment, no one moved. And then Salvatore Moretti began to laugh again. But it had changed. It had gone thin and cracked, because he'd understood, finally, that she'd found the one punishment he couldn't bear, the one he'd spent 15 years and an ocean and his son's life trying to outrun. Not death. Death was clean. She was leaving him alive inside the truth. "You," he started, but Matteo was there. Her brother had crossed the room, and he stood over the man who'd sold him, and Alessia's heart seized, because she'd made her choice, but she couldn't make his, and if Matteo wanted the water and the gun, then that was his to want, and God knew he'd earned it more than she had. Matteo looked down at Salvatore for a long, long moment. "I don't remember you," he said finally. His voice was steady, and it was the steadiest thing in the room, and Alessia understood that her brother had found in the last hour the thing Draco had spent 15 years trying to give him. "That's the thing you never understood. You spent all this, Turi, the money, the man on our wall for 15 years to keep me from remembering. And it worked. I don't remember the yellow room. I don't remember you. I don't remember being sold." He crouched down, close, and his young face was terrible in its calm. "The only father I remember is the one who taught me which fork to use, and stood between me and the world every single day, and never once, not one time, made me watch him take something away." He stood back up. "You're not my father. You're not even my ghost. You're just a name in a book." "The boy, goods delivered." He turned away. "I hope you live a long time. I hope you live forever. Alone." And he walked back to his sister, and Alessia caught him, and the two of them stood together in the ruin of the warehouse, and Draco Fontana rose from the concrete and came to stand at their side. The strange, broken, impossible family, stitched together out of a 15-year-old crime, standing over the man who'd made them, and refusing, all three, to become him. Draco gestured once, and his people took Salvatore, alive, ruined, screaming now, the laughter finally gone, up and out, toward whatever future a man like that had left, which was no future at all, only a long, slow, living death inside the truth. And then it was quiet. Rain on the iron roof, the river against the pilings. Turi's body covered now with someone's coat, near the black water he'd been so afraid of teaching a boy to enter. "You chose," Draco said quietly, at her shoulder. "I chose," Alessia said. She was shaking now, the whole thing hitting her at once. 15 years arriving in her body all at the same time. Did I? "You chose better than I would have," Draco said, and he turned her to face him, and he took her face in his hands, the language of them, and there were tears in the eyes of the man who'd sworn he had no soul left to lose. "You kept yours. I told you you would. I told you that first night in the dark." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Let's go home, Alessia. All three of us. Let's go home." They did not fly home.
It was Matteo who wanted the train, and neither Alessia nor Draco understood why until he explained it, standing on the platform in Palermo Centrale a week later with the Sicilian light pouring down gold through the great iron and glass roof of the station. "I want to arrive slowly," he said. "I spent my whole life not knowing where I came from. I don't want to fall out of the sky into it. I want to travel to it. I want to watch it come." He looked at his sister. "And I want you to tell me things. The whole way, everything you remember. The yellow room, Mama, Rex the dinosaur, all of it. I've got 15 years to catch up on, and I don't want to do it in an afternoon on an aeroplane. I want—" His voice caught. "I want the long way home." So they took the train. They had flown into Rome and come down through Italy the slow way, down the long boot of the country, and now, on the last leg, they crossed from the mainland the old way, the whole train loaded piece by piece onto the ferry at the Strait of Messina, carriages rolling into the belly of the ship, and then the crossing, the water between Calabria and Sicily, silver blue and ancient. Dolphins somewhere off the bow. And then the reassembly on the far side, the train reborn on the island, carrying them the last stretch along the coast to Palermo. Alessia sat with her brother by the window for the whole of it, and she told him everything. She told him about the yellow room, and their mother's hands with the paint on them, and the way she'd sung off-key and hadn't cared. She told him about the plastic dinosaur with the chewed eye and how he'd screened the house down the night it fell behind the radiator and their father had had to fish it out with a coat hanger. She told him about the way he used to fall asleep in the middle of laughing. She told him about the gap in his teeth and how he'd whistle through it on purpose to annoy her. She gave him back his childhood, station by station, town by town, the whole slow length of Italy, and she watched her grown brother receive it like water in a desert, and by the time the train came down the last coast toward Palermo, he knew who he was, both of who he was, the boy from the yellow room and the young man Draco had raised, and he had stopped having to choose between them because he understood at last that he was allowed to be both. Draco sat across from them, mostly quiet, watching the two of them the way a man watches a fire he has decided to warm himself at rather than fear. Sometimes his eyes met Alessia's over her brother's head, and something passed between them, and it needed no words. They had not spoken yet about what they were, the two of them, now that the war was over. There had been no time, in the blood and the aftermath and the machinery of dismantling her father's world, which had gone exactly as Draco planned, quietly, thoroughly, Salvatore Moretti reduced within a month to a shunned old man in a small apartment, alive and named and finished, exactly the sentence Alessia had chosen. There had been no time for the two of them, and Alessia had begun to wonder, in the small hours, whether there would be, whether the thing between them had been a thing of the war, of danger and adrenaline, and the pull of two people who'd forgotten how to want, and whether now, in the ordinary light of peace, it would quietly release them both. She found out on the last stretch, when Matteo had fallen asleep against the window, the boy who used to fall asleep laughing, asleep now with tear tracks dried on his face, and something finally peaceful in it. And Draco moved to sit beside her, and took her hand, and looked out at Sicily coming up gold and silver out of the sea,
The same view she'd had from the plane a lifetime ago, when she'd landed in a place named after murder to go looking for the crime that made her.
"I've been trying to decide," Draco said quietly, "how to say a thing I've never said to anyone. I keep getting it wrong in my head. Everything I know how to say is a threat or an order. I don't have the—" He made the gesture she'd come to love, the man without the vocabulary. The words for the other thing. "Try," Alessia said. He was quiet a moment. The train ran on. Then, "When you walked onto my terrace, I decided I wasn't going to let you leave. Do you remember? I said it to frighten you." His thumb moved across her knuckles. "It wasn't a threat. I understand that now. It was the truest thing I've ever said, and I said it as a threat because I didn't have any other way to say it. I don't want to let you leave, Alessia. Not to America. Not to anywhere. Not ever." He turned to look at her, and the grey eyes that had been a knife in the rain that first night were something else entirely now. Open, undefended, terrifyingly bare. "I spent my whole life making sure I wanted nothing, so nothing could ever be used against me. And then you walked in, and now the whole world knows exactly where to press, and I find I don't care. I'd rather have the wound than the armour. I'd rather have you and be in danger than be safe and be alone." He swallowed. "That's the closest I can get to it. That's my version of the thing other men say easily. I want you. Stay. Not as a guest. Not until the business is settled. Stay because I've been alone my whole life, and I didn't know it until you made me not alone. And I can't go back now. I won't survive going back." Alessia looked at him. At this cold, dangerous, obsessed, broken man who had raised her stolen brother into someone worth loving, who had crossed an ocean to burn down her father's world, who had knelt in the blood and given her back her own choice when everything in him wanted to take it, who had learned at terrible cost to want. And beside them, her brother slept, safe, home, both of who he was at last. "You know," Alessia said softly, "I came to Sicily to find one person, and I found three. My brother and you." She smiled, and it wobbled, and she didn't care. "And me. I found me, too. The one who chooses, the one who kept her soul. I didn't know she was still in there, until you made room for her." "Then that's the answer to a question I didn't have the courage to ask straight," Draco said. "Whether you'll stay." "I'll stay," Alessia said. "Not as a guest. Not until anything's settled." She turned her hand in his and laced their fingers together, blood and choice and all of it. "I'll stay because you're the first person who ever looked at me and saw the whole thing and didn't flinch. Because you love my brother. Because you gave me back my choice when you could have kept it. Because—" She leaned in, and her mouth was close to his, and the train was coming down into Palermo, gold light everywhere, home rising up to meet them. "Because I've used up all my fear, remember? I used it up before I ever landed. There's nothing left in me that's afraid of you. There's only this." And she kissed him, there on the train coming down into Palermo, with her brother asleep beside them, and the whole ruined, beautiful island opening up outside the window, and Draco Fontana kissed her back, like a man who had finally, after a lifetime of taking, been given something, and understood that this, the being given, the staying, the wound of loving out loud, was the only thing he had ever really wanted, and the only thing worth all the blood it had cost. The train slowed, the platform came up, and the three of them, the sister who'd crossed an ocean, the brother who'd found his name, and the dangerous man who'd learned to love in the open, stepped down together onto the ground of Palermo, into the gold light, into the ordinary, miraculous business of a life that was, against every odd, going to be allowed to happen.
Matteo, blinking awake, looked around at the station, at the light, at his sister and his father standing close together with their hands laced. "So," he said, and grinned, the old grin, the gap-toothed grin, the 4-year-old's grin, surfacing through the young man's face for the first time in 15 years. "This is home." "This is home," Alessia said, and it was.